pause that.
Great. Thank you, Emily, so much for that lovely introduction. I second the feeling of being grateful of working with the two of you. It's been an amazing ride. I'd say out of all the departments I've worked in, working with the two of you has been the best. So,
Thanks.
yeah. So we're going to take a look at our agenda here. The main topic, as you all know, is understanding your young child's behavior. So we're going to go over what the functions of behavior are, the ABCs of behavior, which is a mechanism for understanding behavior, and giving you all some tips and strategies on how to manage behavior. And then we'll finish up with a little bit of Q&A. So this is a question we get pretty frequently within our work. Why does my child behave the way that they do? Well, the answer can be simple. It can also be pretty complicated. Generally, behavior can be understood as an expression or an indicator of an unmet need. A lot of times young kids, since they're in the early stages of development, may not have the words or capacity to express themselves fully. So a lot of times we can understand behavior simply by observing the child. You can skip on to the next one, Emily, that's okay. So there are several functions of behavior. And as you can see, I kind of highlighted the initials of it because it is kind of a nice acronym, which is EATS. The first function would be escape. Is exactly how it sounds. A lot of times kids may engage in behavior to get out of something that's unpleasant. The next one would be attention. A lot of times, we think about attention negatively, like, oh, they're only doing this for attention. But a lot of times it also means, that the child wants to spend time with their caregiver, that they want to connect with you. The next one would be tangible, which means that they are looking to seek something out, a physical thing, food, water, a tablet, toys, whatever that may be. And the last one would be sensory. This is more related to, over or under stimulation. A kid may be, jumping around because they're trying to get some energy out, or they may be overwhelmed by, sounds, textures, things like that. And on the next slide, I have some examples here. As you can see, an escape. One example may be, a child throwing a tantrum, trying to get out of cleaning up after they were playing. Attention, you all may have been in these situations where you're trying to get some work done, you're on the phone, and then all of a sudden, here comes your kids, trying to engage with you and get that attention. Tangible can be, this classic example of you're in the grocery store and all of a sudden, your child's throwing a tantrum because they want something from you. The pressure's on, you hand them something that kind of keep them calm. And then the last is sensory, which, like we said, can be anything that may be overstimulating or understimulating. Okay, so how do we figure this out? How do we figure out what the child's behavior means and how to respond to it? The first would be to identify the challenging behavior. What is the specific behavior that you're having trouble managing? What does it look like? What does it sound like? This helps us understand, kind of what our child in crisis looks like. It may be whining, it may be throwing themselves on the floor. The next would be, kind of taking time to observe. What are some factors that may be, influencing the behavior and reinforcing it to increase the likelihood of it happening again? Once you observe and kind of gather that information, you want to kind of look at our functions again and figure out, okay, now that I've seen this, I figured out what the factors are, what is my child trying to express? And then the last thing would be, creating an action plan of how you may manage that behavior. So The ABC method is something that we as clinicians use to help parents kind of figure out how to manage behavior. It's also something that schools use to figure out challenging behaviors as well. But this is something that you as parents and caregivers can also kind of apply to day-to-day things. So the ABCs of behavior is also another wonderful acronym, starting with antecedents. And these are the things that happen before the behavior started. We have our behavior, and then we have consequences, which are not only, a punishment, but it's also thinking about what happened after the behavior occurred that may reinforce it's happened again.
Just unmuting myself briefly to say one thing I didn't say earlier, which is if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A, and I'll be sort of aggregating them and we will be answering them at the end during our Q&A session.
Yeah. All right. So looking at antecedents a little bit more, as we said, these are the things that, took place before the behavior occurred. You may want to ask yourself, who was involved? What was the child doing? Where did the behavior happen? What time of day was it? What was the environment like? All of these things can be factors that may have triggered the behavior that you're seeing. As we know, a lot of times for young kids, common triggers could be they're denied access to something that they want. They may be given a direction they're not interested in doing, or that might be difficult for them. And also transitions, like to and from activities. A lot of times kids have, a hard time ending things. The next behavior, as we talked about, we want to be really specific in how we're identifying this. We may think of behavior generally as like a tantrum, but the more that you kind of identify the specifics of it, the easier it is to kind of recognize that it's coming on. Like, if your kid starts to whine, you may be able to intervene and stop it before it, turns into a full-blown tantrum. So we want to look at those specific behaviors, and we also want to think about, okay, now that I'm seeing this, what is the function? What is this child trying to tell me? And then the last is consequences. As I said, this is more of potential reinforcers that may be encouraging the behavior to happen again. So when you're thinking about that, you want to think about, how did I respond to the behavior? How did my child react? And what might they be learning from the situation? So we're going to pause for a second here and do a little bit of practice on identifying functions of behavior. So Emily's going to turn on a video that we have for you all.
Go ahead. Peanut butter and jelly, come on. Chicken nuggets. No, having chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets. We're not having. We've had chicken nuggets yesterday. Chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets. Look at this. Chicken nuggets. This is your favorite kind. Mommy made it for you. Chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets. Look at me. Chicken nuggets. We're not having chicken nuggets again today. Chicken nuggets. Chicken. You can't have that every day. Chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets. Okay. All right. All right. Go get you some chicken.
All right. Now we have a question for you all. So Emily's going to generate a poll. And the question for the poll is, what do we think the function of the child's behavior in the video was? And you can click more than one answer as well.
See great participation so far. We're inching up towards most of the people on here having participated already. So we'll give you a little bit more time. Okay. I'm going to wrap things up and we can see what we all thought were the functions of this child's behavior.
Ah, very nice.
So a bit of I would say the top two are attention and tangible. And then comes escape and then sensory. So a mixed bag, we think, but maybe attention and tangible.
All right, let's take a look. Yeah, so if we were to break this down using our ABC method, I kind of like to organize things into boxes here, as you can see. The antecedent, and this was pretty simple. The mom gave him a PB&J, right? The behaviors we saw, the child refused to eat. He was yelling chicken nuggets repeatedly. Some consequences were mom initially said no. She tried to hold, the limit firm, but eventually, gives into the child after he continues to refuse. And as you all identified, the function of it was mixed. It was to get the chicken nuggets, but also to escape and avoid the PB&J, which he did not want in that situation. So great job for all of you that got that correct. All right, we have another video here, and same thing. When you're watching the video, we want to see what the potential function of the child's behavior.
Hey guys, I'm eating up and I didn't even have to ask you. All right, I'm gonna get you guys a treat. That's what I found. Mine. Give me that. Look. Here. All right, I'm fighting.
All right, so we're going to launch our poll here. Interested to see what you all have to say about it.
Great participation from this crowd. I'm really impressed. Give it a few more seconds. All right, let's wrap it up. Let's see what we thought. So strong and in the lead by a strong margin, tangible. And we think maybe some attention as well.
All right, yeah. Let's take a closer look at this one. All right, so as we saw, the children were cleaning up. They were doing a great job without mom asking. Mom praises them, she offers a reward and goes off into the kitchen, right? So all of a sudden, one of the children They grab a toy out of the bin. The other child wants it, so they start to argue about it. Mom comes back, sees they're fighting, and gives them the reward, which she initially intended to give for them cleaning up. And then once she did that, the kids stopped fighting. And as you all guessed correctly, it's kind of a mix in this situation. The boys were fighting, they wanted a car, but also it could have been that they were initially seeking out mom's attention and praise for, cleaning up and things like that. In this particular situation, although mom's, reward was well-intentioned, it could have been in this situation that the children may have learned that we get rewards for fighting. Sometimes giving, in this situation, the reward may have been kind of confusing to the kids.
Alrighty, so now that we are a little bit more aware of the meaning behind our kids' behaviors, why they sometimes behave the way that they do, their triggers, and how our responses directly impact their behaviors, I'm going to go over and share a few specific strategies that I think you all can practice at home that could really help shape your child's behavior. So the first one are routines. If your child is trying to avoid or escape a specific task, one thing that could be really helpful is to implement structure and routine. I think it's totally normal for young kids to kind of test the limits. I think that's how they learn what's appropriate versus inappropriate behavior. But it can also be really frustrating and really test our patience as parents and caregivers. And so one way to kind of keep control and to help our children learn is to create structure through consistent routines. Routines are helpful because they teach children what to expect throughout the day. And they have several different benefits. They can help decrease stress about what's going to happen next, reduce anxiety, they help ease transitions, and they help children understand concepts of time. Routines can help improve executive functioning by increasing independence, teaching organizational skills, and practice in following directions. And so on the left here, I provided 2 examples of visual schedules or visual routines that could also be really helpful. Visual schedules use pictures to kind of highlight the different steps in a routine. And visual schedules help to kind of drive home the routine, kind of support routine, and they could also help establish routine. So an example of a morning routine might look like, you wash your face, you wash up, with a towel, you brush your teeth, you put on deodorant, you get dressed, and you put on your ID and your belt. So specific steps in a routine. And then a nighttime, schedule might look like you get your clothes ready for school the next day, you shower with soap, you get your PJs on, you brush your teeth, and you tie up your hair. So again, very specific steps for a routine. So visual schedules can be really helpful. And then another helpful strategy, again, if like a child is trying to escape or avoid a specific task or doing what you ask them to do, one thing that could be really helpful is previewing and warning prepping and previewing expectations ahead of time. So children tend to function at their best when they know what to expect and they're given kind of exact sequence of events. So previewing and warning are examples of techniques that may reduce meltdowns and power struggles, and that might also help to increase compliance. So previewing is when you kind of talk about plans or expectations in advance. They could include, or they should include, where the event will take place, what will happen, when it might be happening, what is expected of the child, and also who is involved. It could include, again, pictures or social stories for our visual learners. And so here I've added just some examples of what previewing could sound like. So it could sound like, in 2 days, you have an appointment with Dr. Sam. Tomorrow, we will go to grandma's house. When I pick you up from daycare today, we will go to the store. We will have to wear our masks and use our quiet voices. So that's and what previewing is. And then warning, if Emily, you want to go to the next slide, warning are kind of reminders of upcoming expectations. They help children kind of get ready for what to do next and what to do what you ask them to do. And they can also be paired with like timers. You could use them with timers or countdowns. So some examples of warnings might sound like, in 5 minutes, we are going to leave. When this TV show ends, it's time for bed. You can put 3 more blocks on, and then it's time to log on to the computer. So those are just some examples of warnings. And then another strategy that could be helpful and used at home to increase compliance are incentives or rewards. So behaviors are more likely to happen again if they're followed by a positive consequence like a reward. Incentives or rewards are really important for many different reasons. They can encourage your child's good behaviors. Again, the way you kind of respond right after your child's behaviors make the behavior more or less likely to happen again. And so rewards can really help to get your child to do more of the things that you want them to do. And then rewards that happen immediately after the behavior are best. Rewards can also help to increase self-esteem. When a child earns a reward, they know that they've done something good and something that you like and that helps them feel good inside. And rewards can also really improve your relationship with your child. I think when you give a reward to your child, you both are happy. You're happy because your child has done something that you like. And of course, your child is happy because they are getting something that they like. Rewards can kind of take the form of a when then statement, so that children know that when they do what is asked of them, then they can have what they want. So some examples I've included here are: when you clean up your toys, then you can watch TV. When you eat your dinner, then you can have dessert. When you put your gloves on, then you can go outside. When you are calm, then I will talk to you. And when you are done with your homework, then you can play. And I will say that rewards aren't particularly effective if your child won't care about the reward or incentive that you're giving them. So if your child really doesn't care about going outside, they prefer to stay inside, they likely won't put their gloves on when you ask them to. But if your child really, really, really loves dessert, then the likelihood that they'll eat their dinner is high. So you should try to pick a reward that your child finds particularly motivating. And then I just wanted to point out that there are several different types of rewards, not just material rewards. Social rewards are also a form of incentives or rewards. They're super low cost or even free, and they can even be more powerful than material rewards. They can also be given more often and immediately after behaviors that you like. So some examples of social rewards are affection, like hugs or kisses, a high five, a smile, a pat on the back. Social rewards are also praise. So giving them a lot of attention for the behaviors that you like. It could sound like, great job playing quietly, thank you for helping me put your toys away. And then another form of social reward is also your attention. Extra time with you, or extra time, playing a specific activity together could also be a form of a social reward that could be super powerful. Another really great strategy that you can use if you feel like your child is kind of behaving in a way to kind of seek your attention could be what we call labeled praise. So praise happens when you give positive attention to your child for the desired behavior, their good behavior. But when you use specific praise, it lets your child know the exact behaviors you like. So when you praise behaviors that you like, your child will do those behaviors more often. And praise can also help, like I said, make a child feel good about themselves. And so on the left here, I've added some examples of what specific praise or labeled praise sounds like. So instead of saying good job, we can say you did a great job finishing your chores. Instead of saying nice work, we're saying, I love that you worked so quietly on your schoolwork. Instead of saying thank you, we want to say thank you for using your words to tell me what you need. So again, labeled praise is very specific to the behavior that you like, and it increases the likelihood that your child will repeat that behavior. And then child-centered time is another great strategy if you feel like your child is behaving in a way that's seeking your attention. It's a chance for you to kind of focus on your child's good behaviors and build a strong, nurturing relationship. You can use the time to really actively listen to your child, praise them, imitate them, and describe what they're doing well. And we usually recommend 5 to 10 minutes of child-centered time every single day. We totally understand parents are super busy. You all are juggling so many different things. So just 5 to 10 minutes every single day, I think is manageable. And of course, if you're able to do more, that's great. I do want to point out that during this time, you should really allow your child to lead the activity. So I think children are told what to do all day, every day, and they have very few chances to kind of take the lead on things. And so if they're given time each day when they're allowed to have some control, be the experts in something and make the decisions, then it will help them feel more independent and build confidence. And ultimately, they will likely be more willing to do what you ask them to do outside of child-centered time. When you're engaging in child-centered time, you should, praise your child's good behaviors. Try to limit any questions, directions, or criticisms during this time, and try to ignore any minor misbehaviors. Again, this should be a positive time between you and your child, and a time where you're kind of letting go of any control during this time. And the more consistent you are with child-centered time, the better. If your child wants scaffolding to teach new skills, so if your child is wanting, for example, like a physical item that they can't have or that you feel is not yet developmentally appropriate for them, you can use it as an opportunity to kind of teach them a new skill. And one way to teach a new skill is through this I do, we do, you do model. And so the I do part of the model is you modeling the new skill. So you're demonstrating how a skill is achieved. You use simple language to narrate your action steps. And you could also use visual aids to reinforce the modeling. And then once that's achieved, you move on to the we do part of the model, where it includes like guided practice, and you're practicing together. So you're working through the skill with your child. You observe any areas of difficulties, and you practice and reinforce the strategies. And then from there, you move on to the you do part of the model, which is independent practice. So you're really just observing your child as they practice the skill on their own. You can provide any feedback during this time. And then of course, use a lot of that labeled praise that we just talked about to acknowledge their efforts. And then another great strategy is to implement some household or family rules. I think family rules can help to establish and reinforce limits and boundaries. If your child wants an item they can't have, having family or household rules can be helpful to kind of remind them what is allowed and what is not allowed. And it helps to hold family members accountable. Family rules really help children understand what behaviors, again, are okay versus not okay. And as they grow, they will be in places where they do have to follow rules. And so following rules at home can really help children learn to follow rules outside of the home. And so it should be, it's really important that your child knows what the family rules are and kind of understand what will happen if that rule is broken. Another really useful strategy that we use often is clear commands. A clear command is when you're kind of telling your child what you want them to do versus what you do not want them to do. A clear command should be specific. It should be stated, it should be said as a statement and not as a question. And they should be simple and really straightforward. We usually encourage just one command or direction at a time. I think that more than one command or more than one direction at a given time can really cause a lot of confusion in kids, and it can make them feel overwhelmed, and it won't be effective, which is why we just recommend just one command at a time. And so I've kind of just given a few examples of unclear versus clear commands. So instead of saying simply just stop it, we're saying sit down at the kitchen table. Instead of saying don't do that, we want to say wash your hands with soap as an example. Instead of do your work, we can say open your computer and log into IXL. Instead of saying put that down, we can say instead put your toys in the blue bin. So again, clear commands are super specific, straightforward, and simple and to the point. And then of course, if your child does what you ask them to do, let them know that you appreciate it. And then here are just a few helpful strategies if your child has any sensory difficulties. I think prepping ahead of time is always very helpful. So for example, if your child is sensitive to noise, you can kind of let them know ahead of time if there will be a noise that you can predict. Like two examples that come to my mind are like turning on the blender or turning on the TV. I know those noises can be particularly triggering for kids, especially those who have sensory difficulties. And so just kind of letting them know ahead of time that the TV is going to be turned on or the blender is going to be turned on. I think that can help your child know what to expect and to prepare for it. And that could kind of help to reduce any like adverse reactions. And there are also numerous sensory tools that can help kind of regulate your child if they have any sensory difficulties. I know, for example, there are headphones that kind of block out sound for quiet. There are different self-soothing tools and objects that could be helpful. For example, you could kind of instruct your child to chew gum, have them listen to any calming sounds. Some weighted objects or stuffed animals could be really helpful. A blanket, some fidget toys, all examples of what could sensory tools that could be helpful. And then of course, another great resource for children with sensory difficulties is occupational therapy. Occupational treatment services help children and families affected by sensory processing difficulties. And I think that is all that we have for you today, but we also wanted to just include our website here. You can feel free to check us out. Our website is rushu.rush.edu/BEC. And we invite you, of course, if you have any questions or concerns about your child's behavior, please give us a call so we can schedule an appointment. And we've listed our number here, but I will share that our number is 312-563-6651. And we do have some time for some questions. If any of you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Great, thank you, Megan and Ashley. Yes, so we got a few questions in our various Q&A and chat avenues, and so we'll get to those shortly. But I would say before we launch into that section, if others have questions specific to children's behavior, this could be a good opportunity to ask. Feel free to chime in, put them in the chat. We're here to try to help. And then before we even dive in though, I have to make a quick plug for these webinars. We so appreciate you coming. We have one more after tonight's, which will be next week, Monday, 7 p.m., Monday the 11th. And that will talk about development. your young child's development. And that will be with our other colleague, Dr. Cynthia Pierre, child psychologist. So we hope to see you there. But for now, let's take a look. So I know that early on, I'm just going chronologically here, we got a chat that wanted to see a slide from earlier in the slideshow. So it was right before the first video. So let me just go back to make sure that we show the slide that I believe, here we go, is being requested. And so here, Ashley was mentioning that the child, your children, and adults too, learn something based on what is the consequence for their behavior. Consequence could be just what follows the behavior. And so in that example from the second video that we watched, the consequence for the fighting was actually a treat. And I think it was just sort of poor timing on the mom's part, but what they learned probably was that they actually get a goodie for fighting, which is not really what we want our kids to learn. So, okay, that was the first of the questions. Oops. And then we had a few in our Q&A domain. And so I will just, I don't know if anyone else can see these, so I'm going to read them out loud, and then I'll turn them over to Megan and Ashley for the response. We have a question. What can I do when the child is always combative and isn't really good with feedback?
Are we able to ask questions back, like if we ask questions?
Yeah, I think so. And I think this particular parent could type it in the chat, or we can give some general statements too. If you have particular questions, maybe that person could type the answers in the chat.
Yeah, I think I was just curious about how old the child is. 13, okay. And can you repeat if they're combative, and what was the last one?
Combative and not really good with feedback.
Not really good with feedback. Yeah, I think that's tough, especially when they are adolescents. I think they're in that phase where in general, they're just generally combative. I think anytime that you can involve them, I think might be really helpful. So if you are able to kind of ask them, ask them what they need, right, from you, how you can participate as a parent caregiver, how you can be helpful to them. I think anytime that they are allowed to kind of take control over what happens, it might help to increase compliance. And then another strategy that came to my mind is to kind of give them some options so that they feel like they kind of have some say and some control, but you're really like controlling, the outcome, if that makes sense. So anytime, if it's possible, kind of giving them a few options of what they can do.
I also wonder too if they have difficulty accepting feedback, which I would imagine would be related to behavior or setting a limit on something. This may be a good opportunity to really amp up the labeled praise or specific praise when they are doing something well, to really reinforce that and to kind of balance the two. We want to give our kids feedback and directions, but we also want to make sure we're acknowledging the good things that they do too. So that may help as well.
Yeah, I like both of those suggestions. And then the last thing I'll share is, for an adolescent, it is, like Megan was saying, developmentally sort of expected that there will be some pushback and more kind of asserting of independence. So we can sort of accept that. And I think what is often helpful for adolescents and even younger kids as well is validating how they might be feeling about a situation in a way that really lets them know that you could understand where they're coming from, right? It doesn't mean that we have to accept their behavior or agree with their behavior, but we can say something like, you know, it is really frustrating to not get to hang out with your friends all the time. I don't know what the particular issue is, right? But not get to hang out with your friends all the time or whenever you feel like it or beyond XYZ hours. I could see why that's really frustrating, and it's part of the expectations in this family. So just kind of acknowledging how they might be feeling can go a long way. It doesn't necessarily change their mood miraculously, but it might increase the likelihood that they feel like you as their parent understand them. Great question. Okay, so our next one was, we have this question. I have a son who loses his gloves constantly. When I find out, I feel as if I react quickly and get way too frustrated. Is there any advice you can give me to handle these situations better?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I feel like happens so often. One thought, right, to kind of reduce your anger is to make it, I don't know what the situation is, like where your son is likely to lose his gloves, if it's at home or at school, but kind of make a few adjustments or changes so that it's less likely for them to lose their gloves. So maybe it's like attaching their gloves to their jacket, you know, making a routine of, as soon as they get home, kind of placing the gloves in a specific place in the home. And another thought that came to my head is, like, if we know our child is notorious for something, no matter what you try, they always will lose their gloves, maybe shifting you know, our expectations just a little bit so that we don't get we're not we're not so quick to anger, or we don't get easily frustrated. And I know that gloves are material item, and they could, depending on, you know, the brand, they could be expensive, and so maybe even consider you know, buying a less, you know, expensive glove. Those are just a few thoughts that came to my head.
Yeah. And I would add, you know, and this goes for like any behavior, losing gloves, anytime you get frustrated, I'm a huge proponent of the parental timeout, which means like maybe, you know, you need a couple minutes or so to collect yourself. It's okay to step away, you know, in a quiet space and come back when you feel like, you know, you're ready to address it, regardless of, you know, what it is, so that, you know, you're serving your best self to your children.
Yeah, I think this comes up so often, and actually just came up in a group that I was running earlier. And the last thing I'll mention is shifting the way that we think about the situation. So we often, our go-to thought there is like, he's doing this on purpose, or like, I'm gonna lose my mind if he does this again. You know, something pops into our head and it makes us feel really frustrated. And in those parental timeouts, or in these moments, right, where we're all kind of learning about behavior and thinking through things, it's helpful to think about this. It's a little meta. How can I think about my child's behavior a little bit differently to make me less frustrated in those moments? So maybe a more helpful and accurate thought there is, he's, you know, I don't know how old he is, but he's learning how to keep track of his items. He's a kid. This takes some time. He's doing his best. I'm doing my best, right? And so those types of thoughts are going to make us feel a lot less frustrated in those moments. These are great questions though. Keep them coming. I think we still have some time. So we have, when I realized maybe there was an earlier chat that I missed. Hold on, let's see. Oh, we had a question. Will you have access to the slides? We do have all of your email addresses. And so if you don't mind us spamming you a little bit, we can definitely send these slides out. So if anyone is adamantly opposed to that, you can you can chat me individually, but otherwise you'll probably be receiving these slides. And then we have another question. What can I do to build or kind of help my two children become a little closer? My daughter's 13 and my son is 6.
Yeah, these questions are great. Thanks, guys. I think the child-centered time strategy that I talked about earlier could be a really great way to nurture the relationship between siblings. Child-centered time could certainly be done with several different kids of different ages. And it might be helpful to model also like how you want your children to behave with one another, and think about what specifically you'd like to see more. Maybe it's sharing, maybe it's using kind words with one another. And going back to using child-centered time, you should pick like an activity or a game or an activity that is I would say that it's developmentally appropriate for a 13 and 6-year-old, and that they both would enjoy.
Yeah, I would say that would be my go-to strategy as well. And that, getting back to that labeled phrase, it really comes in handy a lot. And so, this is hard because the age differential is such that those two children are in different developmental stages. And so we would expect that the 13-year-old similarly would not be too interested in hanging out with their 6-year-old sibling. But when you catch that 13-year-old in particular is the one that I'm thinking about, when you catch them being kind or inclusive with the 6-year-old, and whatever that looks like, maybe it's as little as like helping them out with their homework, or letting them sit next to them on the couch, whatever it looks like, really identifying that and labeling it for the 13-year-old and praising them for it. That, thanks. I maybe on the side, I know it's not always fun. This is combining that validation piece. I know it's not always fun to hang out with your 6-year-old sibling, but I was really impressed. That was really cool. I appreciate it. These are awesome questions. I think those were the only ones that I saw in the various chats. If anyone else has any other questions, we do still have some time. And if not, we can wrap things up. So I'll give it maybe one more minute. Otherwise, we'll give you 9 minutes of your evening back, and you'll be able to see these slides anyway. Send them out. So I'll wrap us up, but like we said earlier, if you have concerns about your children, we meet with families all the time on an individual one-on-one basis. Families, I should clarify, in that infant through age 8 range, families of younger children, to help problem solve these exact scenarios and questions, and do our best to give guidance given what's going on in your individual lives on how to best proceed. And so we are available to all of you, and please do reach out if there are other things we can be helpful with. But for now, I will say good evening, good night. Thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you next week, same time, same place. And thank you to Ashley and Megan for your great presentation.
Yes, thank you all for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Yes, thank you. Have a good night, guys.
Good night. Thanks.